listening to Transformation in Trials. Welcome to Transformation in Trials. This is a podcast exploring all things transformational in clinical trials. Nothing is off limits on the show, and we will have guests from the whole spectrum of the clinical trials community. And we're your hosts, Ivana and Sam. Welcome to another episode of Transformation in Trials. Today with us we have André, who is one of the founders and chief executive of Fleming Protocol.
Hi everybody, good to be here.
Happy to have you. Today we'll be focusing on data and the right to own your own health data. And one of the first questions that I would like to ask you, André, is there is some underlying philosophy, there's some principles that the work that you do rely on. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I guess I'll give a quick summary as to kind of the overall kind of strategy we're taking with Fleming Protocol. So we're in essence kind of building platforms and tooling in the Web3 space so that patient communities alongside scientists and industry can tackle unmet healthcare needs. So I guess the underlying philosophy behind what we're doing is to allow patients to have more say in how research and funding priorities and decisions are made. And also having their input when it comes to looking at the decentralized clinical trials, the design of study protocols, etc. I think once you kind of align industry interests and biotech interests with genuine patient needs and sourcing that from the patients and their underlying data, I think that can lead to better innovations in this space and lead to better outcomes for patients.
And do you experience that patients are interested in having a say in what is researched?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we've had this question a lot. So I guess like with any patient community, there's always going to be the really passionate side of the community who really want to drive change. So, for example, we're collaborating a lot with the diabetes community, and some of the kind of key drivers in that community had several meetings with the FDA to discuss kind of policy-related matters and translating new devices and software to market. So definitely there is a very passionate patient community who definitely want to say, because they feel that what the industry is providing and also how regulators go about their business isn't always in the best interest of those patient communities. But it's not to say that everybody in the patient communities has that same passion, but it's just that there is that very passionate side of these communities, and we want to kind of enable them to have more influence in these discussions.
And is the influence primarily both in general what is being researched, or are you more focusing on the data that these patients generate themselves and what is done with that data?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of all of those things. So in essence, the kind of primary basis of what we're building, so we're basically building patient peer-to-peer network. So you probably heard of Patients Like Me, which is like a website where patients kind of come together and offer peer advice and help to improve their lives and condition and the management of their disease. But also I think within that, there's a good basis for understanding what the unmet needs are in those patient communities. And so it's a way of kind of using that way of doing things to identify those needs and then getting funding to get those needs met in terms of more tangible products and intellectual property, etc. So yeah, there is definitely a decision-making element to all of that and having patients drive that. But I think underlying the kind of research efforts and understanding what the unmet needs are will involve some of the data of these patient communities as well. And, for example, we're partnering with Night Scout, who's one of the key diabetes organizations. And yeah, they're very much about leveraging patient data to kind of develop better tooling. And I think we're in essence going to be having that similar philosophy. I think both having both of those elements is very key. I think real world data and really high quality patient data is going to be a key driver in actually really understanding what the problems are.
And maybe can you walk us through both your vision for the solution that you're building and how that ties into this whole setup?
Yeah, so in essence, so what we're building kind of comes into several parts. So we're building kind of peer-to-peer networks where, as I mentioned, patient communities will come together, offer peer-to-peer support. That'll also be the basis for identifying what the unmet needs are. But we're also going to have kind of collaborators such as scientists or healthcare professionals or even industry companies who would participate in that system as well. Because so this is where the kind of Web3 element comes in. The idea is that underlying this, there'll be a DAO kind of infrastructure to help kind of coordinate the decision making, ensure that members can make decisions in a transparent way and a way for them to actually impact the decisions which are made, but also fund ideas that they agree should be funded. And then, yeah, assuming that those are funded, and then the proposal leads whoever submitted that idea to the DAO to develop would get some funding. And we're also developing tooling to allow the communities to develop what they want to develop. So, for example, our first tool is going to be a decentralized research platform. Obviously, since over the past few years, the idea of doing decentralized clinical trials has gained a lot of traction, I think rightfully so. It's more better for the patients and also for industry because patients can be more engaged and whatnot. So, so we have the kind of evidence generation tool and the ability to do that. That's obviously going to be very key because it's one thing to fund ideas that tackle unmet needs, but we also need to kind of develop the evidence to kind of demonstrate to regulators as well as potential industry partners that this is actually having a benefit. And the idea of having that kind of traceability on the blockchain also helps with that as well. Because with patient communities at the moment, they interact on Reddit forums, Facebook and whatnot, and the data is kind of a bit disparate. But I think having this kind of structure underneath that helps solve that problem to some degree.
So it sounds like you're building a kind of innovation infrastructure, tapping into the chatter that already happens between patients and trying to direct that a little bit towards some outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because at the moment, these kind of peer-to-peer interactions do happen. But the issue is that they don't have the kind of the funding mechanisms to kind of progress what they discuss into something more tangible. Because I think typically the funding for biomedical innovations comes from industry or grants funding. And I think that's not always distributed in the way that these patient communities would want. And the idea of having DAOs in this new kind of funding vehicle as well as coordination vehicle can be a alternative that hasn't always existed. Because like with the kind of diabetes community, they've done a lot of great work open source and it's done a lot in kind of people's spare time, but they kind of recognize the kind of level up what they've been doing over the past decade does require a kind of funding mechanism to allow them to kind of level up their efforts. And this is where the kind of the funding in the DAO a coordination tool comes in, if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe diving a little bit deeper into that, you mentioned that based on this distributed process, this is how decisions are made on what to fund. Maybe you can go into a little bit more detail about what kind of decisions are being made and how does the funding piece work?
Yeah, so in essence, DAOs typically have membership, and that's usually represented by tokens. And so each member of the DAOs that we're building, patients, scientists, and whoever, would have a ability to participate in some way, shape, or form. And obviously, some decisions can be around, for example, scientific proposals or a new kind of device or some kind of software to improve the management of their condition. So I guess in terms of decisions which can be made around that, it's mainly around whether this is something that's worth pursuing. We kind of source those ideas from the community based on the kind of peer-to-peer platforms that we're developing. But the kind of key decisions at this early stage of our development is whether the community fund should be used in that way. And in terms of so you asked about the funding and how that works. So typically DAOs have a token sale, and we're still kind of working out because we haven't actually launched our DAO to be public yet. Typically you would have a token sale. People can buy into the DAO if they believe in the mission, and a proportion of the token sale would be the treasury. And that treasury is in essence used to fund the ideas that the patient community have discovered, or it could be also used to kind of incentivize behavior which is productive to the mission of the DAO.
That's interesting, and it's also flipping things a little bit on its head. Because I come from the life sciences world, and we're used to that we're the ones who decide what kind of research is conducted and in which disease areas. So this is giving the say back to the patients and focusing on whatever they feel is important.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think if we're able to do that more often, that benefits patients, but I think also it would benefit the industry as well. Because so one of the kind of key examples that we talk about a lot is the kind of automated insulin delivery, also known as the artificial pancreas, which was actually initiated by this open source diabetes movement. And if you fast forward to now, like all of the major device makers in diabetes have started to adopt that technology, and that's now contributing to $1 billion in revenue per year. But that wouldn't have happened if that wasn't initiated by the patients. What may have, but it's happened a lot quicker because they had that push from the patients who couldn't wait and had to innovate out of necessity. So I think that there is definitely huge potential to have this new way of doing things, which benefits patients, but can also benefit industry to be them, allow them to be more innovative and actually tackle needs that the patients express.
Well, that's another interesting point. When we, from a life sciences perspective, try to identify which areas to invest in, we try to look at the market size and how much can we make based on this drug. It sounds like in what you're describing, it's more about using the wisdom of the crowd to identify those same areas, but also it being more of a pull than a push from industry.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I use that example of the closed loop. Or there's several names. You got closed loop, artificial pancreas, and obviously before that, device makers were kind of making billions in revenue from what they were previously doing. But because of the patient's initiative and innovation, it's allowed the industry to unlock new markets. And you have so A16Z, which is a big VC. They wrote an article in the past few months around the next generation of big companies, and they predict that's going to be in the realm of consumer health. And I think ultimately to unlock that, you need to actually engage the consumers, which is in this case is the patients. So it's definitely a new way of doing things for sure. But I think I think over time, I think what I'm saying will bear out because I think if you solve a genuine need in this way, it can be quite profitable.
Yeah, and it does align with the whole empowered patient movement that we're taking more control of our own health, our own experience, our own data, and trying to be more mindful of how do we use that and who benefits from the usage of it. Yeah,
and I think obviously that the term real world evidence and real world data has become more of a thing, because that's much more. There's much more of it, and it's more reflective of the patient's day-to-day experience. And I think that can definitely serve a role in kind of supplementing the traditional clinical trial system. And I know like the likes of the FDA, the EMA in Europe and the MHRA have kind of released some statements around real-world evidence and how that should be used. And I think, so I think that's kind of gives even more of an essential reason as to why industry needs to engage with patients, because they're the ones who are best placed to aggregate this real world data in one place. Otherwise, it's all quite disparate and not quite complete. The patients are the common denominator across all those different sources.
And how do the ideas for areas of research, how do they reach the platform?
Yeah, so I guess what we're thinking at the moment is the kind of peer-to-peer networks that we're developing. Through those interactions, the unmet needs will be identified, and so it'll be primarily from that. So it's going to be very much a patient bottom-up approach, and obviously these systems will also have other professionals, whether it be healthcare professionals and scientists who are also part of the system. But the idea is that the ideas which are kind of developed into proposals and then funded are kind of derived from the peer-to-peer interactions. And yeah, it could be a scientist or even a university if you're looking at therapies who may have an early bit of research and may see this and go, oh, okay, actually what we're researching could help to tackle that unmet need, and then submit a proposal to the collaboratives that we're building. But yeah, the idea is that we want to, as much as possible, identify the needs through these patient peer-to-peer networks, and then whoever has some research or ideas and innovations which can tackle that, provide the ability for them to submit a proposal, and then the kind of community can then decide. But it'll also be kind of we're going to be building in some due diligence. So we have a network of professionals in the diabetes space who are scientists and also commercial professionals. Because I think there'll be like a level of expertise required to vet whether these proposals stack up financially, but also in terms of clinical and scientific outcomes. But fundamentally, all of this will be driven by the needs identified in the patient communities.
What happens when an idea is formed? It's got input from many different peers. It develops into something completely different than what was originally created. Who owns the idea, and does it matter in your platform?
Yeah. So do you mean own in terms of like own the intellectual property, or?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think at the moment, DAOs, when they, so if you take VitaDAO, which is probably the leading example in the DeSci space, they've funded a couple dozen projects, several million in total. As far as I recall, when they give funding to the proposal leads, the research outputs are actually, the intellectual property is actually owned by the DAO collaborative. It'll be owned by the DAO. And I guess in terms of kind of how that intellectual property is commercialized, again, it would need to be kind of a collaborative decision on that. But of course, there needs to be expertise within that too. But to answer your question, the outputs are owned by the DAO. But in terms of whether the initial idea changes for some reason, I mean, we're not at that point where that's happened, but I could totally foresee where like there's an area of research which isn't as fruitful, but then there's a decision that we need to pivot to make it fruitful. I think in essence there can be some decision processes in terms of the governance groups I've described, which can help to steer that, and then kind of present that to the community as to whether they agree with that, and then pursue that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. So the DAO owns the intellectual property, and the DAO is owned by the token holders, so it will remain very decentralized.
Correct. Yeah. That's the ambition. And I think because we haven't actually launched the DAO yet, we're kind of taking a gradual process towards that. So we're kind of developing the community, designing, how the DAO will work, and running that by community members just to make sure that they sign up and agree to how things are working. Just having a very transparent process before we launch it live in public, because once you do that, it's very hard to change. The idea ultimately, the ultimate ambition is to have a decentralized process, and where there is a need for particular expertise, the community can delegate to members who have the expertise, but all within the context of that decentralized system.
And this deep expertise and competencies that you would need to evaluate some of these ideas and make sure that they make it to the market, how do you make sure that the community has the expertise needed?
Yeah, so I think in this case, so if we take the scientists and commercial angle, because we've been involved with the diabetes community for quite some time, we have some really good links with some of the companies and some of the academic institutions, and within that there's commercial experts. So we basically at this point are looking to source some of those professionals from our network. So that is somewhat centralized, and obviously when we decentralize, we want to kind of open up that process to people beyond just our immediate network. And yeah, there need to be some kind of mechanism so that we can verify people's credentials in terms of if they say that I can provide this, there needs to be some kind of proof to properly vet that. And yeah, there's a variety of different mechanisms around kind of proof of humanity and yeah, just kind of checking certain credentials behind people's claims that we'll probably leverage. But at this point in time, we've got this network and we have all these connections to all these institutions, and we'd be looking to leverage those. But over time, we'd want to decentralize that, so it's not just kind of a centralized group of us just picking individuals that we kind of think will be appropriate, even though, you know, we would run this by some of our key patient collaborators to see if they agree with that. But yeah, that's not fully decentralized, but the ambition is to have a form of that, but in a more decentralized manner. But we're not quite there yet because we're taking things a bit more gradual.
And that's, I think, a perfect segue to maybe telling us more about where are you in your process and what's next? Yeah,
so yeah, we've got some key partnerships with you know, a variety of different patient groups. Some of the main ones in the diabetes space, as well as some academic institutions and diabetes centers based in the US and Europe. So we have that engagement, and yeah, there's been a lot of discussion around basically how this system will work. We are still quite early in the process, but yeah, we have a really good understanding now, and we're planning to launch our kind of first peer-to-peer network in the next month or so. And we've got some kind of dedicated parts of that which will be focusing on particular areas. So one will be kind of involving some members from the Nights Out community, but also we're looking to have another peer-to-peer network on a rare form of diabetes called hyperinsulinism. So a rare disease in diabetes. So yeah, the idea is that we kind of get these networks live and kind of have that engagement on the platform in the way that I've described, and we'll have that process going in the next month or two. And yeah, as well as that, we're also kind of engaging with kind of potential commercial partners, some medtech companies who are creating diabetes products. I've actually got a pitch next week, which will be presenting to some industry key organizations, and yeah, just kind of really building those kind of corporate partnerships, because yeah, it's one thing to have these peer-to-peer platforms, but we also need to partner with industry to actually get their expertise and capital to allow these things to become more tangible, as well as the mechanisms I've described. And we also already have a MVP of our clinical decentralized research platform as well. We're just kind of making some iterations to that at the moment. But yeah, we're looking to, in the next month or two, kind of have some very simple observational studies to kind of prove out the tech and make sure it's working before we kind of increase the level of sophistication and complexity of trials going forward, which will need to happen, but we need to start from a kind of very simple proof of concept and make sure it all works.
And how has the industry responded so far?
Yeah, so I think based on my interactions, so yeah, like with I think kind of the idea of DSI is very much a new kind of concept to the world in general, and I think that will take a bit of time to kind of get critical mass in that respect. But the good thing is that we have kind of got kind of early engagement from academic institutions as well as industry, and yeah, and they kind of recognize the value in what we're doing. You know, the idea of having a pool of patients that they can kind of run innovations past, and also that can be an avenue to more easily recruit patients into clinical trials as well, which is obviously a challenge given the current way of doing clinical trials. So yeah, I think based on the interactions that we've had, they definitely are aligned philosophically because they recognize the benefits of doing things this way. But I think to kind of get the broader pharma and an academic industry to adopt it on a mass scale will take some time. But I think the way that we do that is build credibility with the partners that we do have. And then once we show them that our way is so much better than what's previously existed, then, it makes sense to them to jump on the bandwagon.
And have you been impacted by some of the turbulence in the crypto world in general, since it's a similar technology that you're using?
Yeah, I think impacted in the sense that some of the patient communities that we interact with, for example, I think before they started speaking to us, they had a somewhat negative perception of crypto just based on all the kind of the media kind of stories. I think that's mainly what people see. But then obviously we kind of speak about the potential and actual really good impact it can have in this space. But then obviously there's been some pretty disastrous high-level stories in the crypto space recently, which again, they kind of come to me and say, what is this about? And you have to kind of explain that, yeah, obviously that is very bad and you have to kind of accept that. But ultimately, there's very particular reasons for that, and it doesn't really change what we're aiming to do and what we're trying to achieve. And so it is impacting in the sense that, yeah, people see that and then they kind of pause for a moment and think, well, hang on a minute, I'm not sure about this whole crypto thing. But I think, yeah, it's just trying to be, I think, as a general principle, it's always good to be transparent with the people you're working with. I think especially in health and in the pharma space and patient groups, it's just being transparent and yeah, just kind of working with a sense of integrity. And I think if you do that, then you can kind of minimize those concerns and just carry on as you were. Yeah.
And for me, I have this subtle hope that after this turbulence is over, that we'll be able to see, well, that Web3 is way more than just a currency. It's a whole technology that we can use for probably other fruitful things than just this very narrow application.
Yeah, agreed. And I think also one of the kind of, somewhat benefit of what's been happening recently is, people are kind of reevaluating, okay, that's been a disaster. So we need to kind of still leverage the philosophy to do something good. And I think that's why decentralized science, DeSci, has in the past year or so has caught a lot more traction and attention, because people actually see this as being a really good use case of the crypto and Web3 technology. So it's been beneficial in that sense as well. It's people are kind of really keen to have a really good beneficial use case, and I think DeSci is probably the leading example of that. And because there's so much needs that need to be tackled from the patient side, but also from the scientist side, peer review, etc. There's a lot that can be tackled with this philosophy.
And Andre, if you look ahead, maybe 2 or 3 years, and all your wildest dreams come true for what this platform can do, what is the situation then?
Yeah, I think ultimately, we're in the business of trying to improve people's lives and tackle unmet needs in a way that industry hasn't quite done. And I think obviously a very good ambition in the next few years is to actually have examples of, things that the community has discovered and developed or have made some good progress on that can reach the market and have the benefits that we hope for. Obviously, getting a therapy to market, for example, takes a very long time. But I think if we're able to demonstrate that the community is able to identify some really innovative areas of research and development and kind of collaborate with pharma and get that progressing towards the market, then that would be a good win. And I think I think adoption is obviously great as well. I think, but that will come with us kind of proving and doing proven value, but also doing things with integrity. So I think it just comes down to any outputs which kind of get us closer towards, curing patients and helping patient communities is always a win. So I think, I think I've answered that.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, how did you get interested in this space in the first place?
Yeah, so I guess I've been involved in the crypto space, just kind of more investing since 2017. But then kind of in the past few years, I've kind of looked at the technology and the potential beyond just currencies, as you mentioned. And then also I've been involved in the health and life sciences industry for around a decade. Advising life science companies and healthcare systems on a variety of matters relating to kind of economic policy, healthcare policy, and also strategy for those across a variety of different disease groups. And yeah, I think just seeing how these systems could be so much better, but also seeing the potential of decentralizing elements of the decision-making and funding process and giving more power to the end users. I just saw that it makes sense to get started, and yeah, I guess that's why we're here. And obviously, just as more personally, I've seen kind of and got people close to me who suffer from chronic conditions, and I think obviously it's a very difficult thing for some of them, and I think if we're able to make their lives easier by improving the systems of healthcare and also the life sciences, I think that's a very motivating factor for me as well. Because we all need to rely on these systems at some point in our lives, and we probably have already. And I think if we can improve them, then it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Andre, as we start wrapping up, we always ask our guests one final question in this podcast, and that is, if you had a magic wand that you could wave and change one thing in you can pick life sciences or health industry, what would you change?
There's so many kind of different factors into what we're building, which we're trying to change. But I think, if it had to be one thing, it would be like patients having a tangible and powerful and meaningful role in the process of deciding and driving the future of healthcare and the life sciences. However form that takes, I think, if we're able to do that, I think would solve a lot of issues, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. And a lot of episodes we kind of return to this topic, that if patients were involved in, for example, trial design to begin with, then clinical trials would be more successful. And in many other instances too. Yes, agreed. Such an important point. Well, Andre, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm sure our listeners have too. If they have follow-up questions or want to reach out to you, how can they find you? Yeah, I think the best thing to do is just to follow our Twitter account, and the inbox is open, so just feel free to reach out, and we'll respond. And if there's anyone that's out there who's listening who is really compelled by what they've heard, or feel like they want to collaborate or just be a part of what we're trying to do, we're very open to speaking to people and collaborating, and because it's a very important mission, and we're more than happy to work with people who are aligned with that mission. So just feel free to reach out via Twitter, and we can take it from there. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for your time. It's been great. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Transformation in Trials. If you have a suggestion for a guest for our show, reach out to Sam Parnell or Ivana Rosendahl on LinkedIn. You can find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or in any other player. Remember to subscribe and get the episodes hot off the editor.